Okay, I guess it's fine. I'll just start now. Can you hear me over there in the back? Because I'm coming down with the flu a bit, so I hope my voice will carry, but in case you don't understand me, there's more chairs here. Just in case. Okay, so for my talk, I figured we're a Plone conference, and I have things to show, or mostly to show inside Plone. So I skipped the traditional slides, and I'm just going to do my talk in Plone, and hope that works. Famous last words. What I'm going to talk about today is patternslib and how patternslib that we've been using a lot, how to integrate them into Plone. So to start off by asking the question, okay, patternslib, what is it? Like the rule of the very simple sentence, the claim is a library of reusable patterns which let you create rich, dynamic, and interactive prototypes or websites without having to know or care about JavaScript. So what that means is patternslib is a package, first and foremost, built by and from a web designer's perspective. That means a web designer who knows all about CSS and stuff like that, and have ideas about interactions, but they don't know or care about or like JavaScript or anything, or they get scared if they look at something that looks like JSON format. I mean, that's just, designers just don't work that way. But what designers know a lot about, and like web designers, is CSS and adding classes, etc., stuff like that. So the purpose of patternslib is to make interactions via JavaScript available in such a way that the designer just adds like a class or class attributes plus maybe a data attribute, and then things will just work the way they intended. So like this very simple example here, on a div, you add the class pathCollapsible. The first block element will be the trigger, and the rest will be that stuff that gets shown. That's the most simple use case ever. And of course, you can get more complicated and add, I don't know, a special trigger attribute, yada yada. But like this is the most simple thing. So if I click here, check this out. This is my recommendation. If you want to know more about what patterns is and how it was built, check out JC Brandt's awesome talk from last year from Bucharest, from the PloneConf. That's really what I would recommend. Like, he gives a really good overview. So what's the state with patterns in Plone? In Plone 5, we have mockup. Mockup gives us, for example, the date picker and lots of widgets. And mockup, long story short, started as a fork of patternslib. I think it was inspired by a talk on the Plone conference in Arnhem 4 or 5 years ago, and then got picked up by Rock, Garbas, and other people, and started working on it. And somehow patternslib and mockup diverged a bit. And in recent years, there was efforts to unify them again. So now that mockup is more a specialized variant of patternslib. It uses the same base pattern. There are still subtle differences, and there are duplicate patterns, etc. But anyway, mockup is just a flavor of patternslib, and lots of that is already available in Plone. But patternslib has just a lot more to offer. So if you want to know more about the history, JC Brandt did another awesome talk last year explaining about how patternslib and mockup evolved and got back together again, etc. Patternslib is a thing that we at our company use a lot for Plone sites or building prototypes, etc. And we had one customer project where we thought, like usually, we use that for Plone intranet, Quave. That's where patterns gets used heavily. But we also had a smaller, just pure Plone 5 project, and we just wanted to use more patterns than mockup offers us. So we thought, actually, we have all these cool patterns available. Why don't we just try to integrate them in a simple way in Plone so that other users can just install a package and use them. And so this is where plone.patternslib comes in. As I write here, it's still in an early stage, but already you can use it and work with it. Certainly it can use improvements, but to start off, it comes already with some example pages. Like if I click here, you will see it just offers some browser views that demonstrate, okay, this is a pattern, so this is pat switch. I can switch based on input a class, for example, really simple example. And then there's always a link to the documentation. Or the other example is a clone, which I really like. You can build a form and add as many extra fields or groups of fields as you want, remove them again, etc. And all this just by adding a few classes and data attributes. So if I click here on the documentation, it will go to the patternslib website and just show you for every pattern how it, like the demo, this is where I copied it from basically, usage examples, and often at the bottom, the optional reference, what can you really, like what data attributes can you really put in and to make it, to adapt it more.
Somewhere?
Sorry?
That's on the network, the internet somewhere?
That's patternslib.com, yeah.
Okay.
But that takes me actually to my next slide, because the resources where to find that. So patternslib is patternslib.com, like it's the core package. And patternslib is completely agnostic of Plone. You can use it for whatever. You can use it to build, like we use this a lot to build prototype sites, and they just run on Jekyll. And afterwards, we just take that very prototype that has all the CSS and all the interaction and just use the YASO and apply it to Plone. That's our workflow for most of that. But you don't need a backend behind patternslib. If you have, you can really build simple one-page sites with that. Then there's plone.patternslib. This is like the little extra package that I'm talking about, which is under, well, you could say the foundation is there, can use improvement, but this is where the examples live and where the idea behind it, you just install it as an add-on in Plone and you get the extra pattern. So this is what I did to my demo Plone site. And of course, there's mockup, which is the integration in Plone, which also comes with a demo page and an explanation page, and this is already built in. And you might wonder, okay, so also this, I mean, this usage pattern is quite well known these days, simple tabs, but I mean, this is also just built by using a pattern, pat stacks. Basically, you just define a section, like an article section called the pat stacks. Every section in that gets a unique ID, and you just need anchors that reference those IDs. And to prove that this is really plain Plone, like this is the page, this is the slide actually. So everything is there. I just added a simple Plone page and put the stuff in there. So I do have the formatting is not nice, but here I have the article pat stacks and like section ID patternslib, yada yada, section ID Plone, and I just reference them up here. So that's you don't need anything else if you have that package installed. Okay, but so this was a bit introduction to the whole matter. Now let's look at a real example. Time to start with the story, and this is where I need to install my demo package. I hope this works now. Okay, so we have a client like a Acme Corporation. They're a international manufacturer of handy products, from animal delivery services to Zet for whipped cream, whatever. Anyway, global player. They have they're spread all over the world. And they have different plants production plants where they produce all their fancy things, and they don't do that all by themselves. They have suppliers. And so these suppliers, they deliver goods to various of the production plants, and they want to check the quality. So these suppliers get audited from time to time. That results in an audit report. So for every supplier, there will be one or more audit reports, and there can be different types, etc. So this is a classic requirement that you can fulfill very nicely with a plone CMS. It doesn't have to be plone, but with the CMS. But plone is a nice fit. You can build your custom content types, etc. Store the data, yada yada. And then there's this vague client additional request, but it should look nice and modern and flashy. Like, that's sometimes the request you get. Make it look nice. Well, what? How? Well, you know, nice. Okay, this is like very stupid dexterity content types. Just for the sake of the example, we model a supplier, which is a folderish content type, and in that we build those audit reports. So the main focus is on somebody gets audited, and this is not formatted at all. It's just really, really plain stupid. So we have a dexterity content type with different fields, custom fields, and some fields have vocabularies, and you can choose them, etc., and different audit types and audit results, blah blah. So that's basically our setup. Okay, so one of the requirements is they get lots of suppliers in, and the database starts to grow. They want to have a quick and easy overview or entry page to look at what suppliers do I have currently and just filter quickly. So this is the pattern I'm showing you is of nothing new, but basically the first approach is, or this very naive approach, you do a custom search, a list of all suppliers, long list, but you want to search through them quickly and filter, so you can just type 2 letters or whatever, and it filters it down, or just reverse, like you can have more than one filter parameter. But you might notice, so I type something, it submits automatically, immediately. So this is also where a pattern comes into play, and this is the auto-submit pattern. And literally the only thing to enable that or to make that work is in our form tag we add the class pat_auto_submit. And if we look at the documentation, okay, and for this pattern the documentation doesn't give us that much, but yeah, the auto-submit pattern just will submit the form when there's input. The documentation is actually missing a bit more information. You can have delays. For example, you don't want to necessarily immediately, if the user starts typing something, submit the form, but when the field loses focus or something. So yeah, but you might have noticed, looking at the story, you type something, the form gets submitted, and that's how plone works. Out of the box, you submit the form, the page reloads, and that's so 2006. So like, we can do much better than that. So this is exactly the same form again, just with a little enhancement. So I type something, and you notice I don't even lose focus in the field anymore, because I stay there, because the page doesn't reload, but only the content area, and that's what patternslib refers to as injection. So again, on the form tag that I just showed you, we keep the auto submit, but we add another class called pat_inject. So that means the action of that form will trigger not a complete page reload, but I mean like this first part here is just the name of my browser view, which I call suppliers listing injection. and I append with a hash mark suppliers, like the ID, because that will be the ID in my page of that element that's going to be replaced. So, and looking at the results area, this is just the ID, the div with the ID suppliers, where all the suppliers get listed, where the actual code happens. I repeat over the suppliers and blah, blah. So as a reminder, again, the action of my form is I just link to my own browser view, my own form again, hash mark suppliers. This is the most simple example of using injection. This is where I just tell path inject that it should fetch the result from the new page, but replace the current div with the ID suppliers with that with the new div ID suppliers that it would normally get back. And yeah, here it makes sense to have a look at the documentation because there's a nice graphic in there that explains it. So basically, you can imagine this is our original page, a div or whatever element with a certain ID, like here content. The form gets submitted and would normally redirect or show B, but instead of showing it like that, we just rip out that area and insert it into the new A. And that can, you can have more complex use cases. It doesn't have to be just a one-by-one replacement, but you can have multiple sources and multiple targets. Yeah, just scrolling down a bit more. So here's an example that I want to highlight. You don't. Sorry. Sorry.
Nothing.
Oh, sorry. You don't necessarily. I mean, the example that I showed you, just linking to an action tag or an href with the ID is the most simple example, but you can also be more explicit and with a data attribute define, okay, my source is an element with the ID source and target 1 from the new page, etc. So what I showed you in the example is just like here. This is the equivalent of what I show you in my example. This is just the most simple form or a shorthand form, but like path inject or the injection pattern is one of the most complex and for me most useful patterns that you can use because you can do such amazing and nice things with it. That's why also the documentation on that specific pattern is quite long and you have several options. So I'll leave that to you, to the interested audience to read that up on their own time. So that's what we get here. Okay, so we're getting somewhere, but still it was like really stupid, just a form, just a listing. It's not really nice yet, isn't it? But also here, PatternSlib can offer us help. And of course, you need to know a bit of CSS. But actually, all the patterns, they come as an example on the PatternSlib website. You can basically start with copying the CSS from there. It's sassified. So the same listing that we had before and the same little filter and auto submit, and that's just masonry. That's just a way of aligning box elements. And so if I don't know, resize, that it will automatically readjust, or if I make my browser window smaller, like that. So that's a pattern that just wraps the existing package masonry and makes it available as a class attribute. So you can say this is, okay, here, define in this area, use pat masonry. And in that case, you just give it a selector. class tile. So in all my results, every name of every supplier, I just give it the class tile, and Pat Masonry will pick up on that. And also here, so Masonry is just a JavaScript grid layout library. So this is not something that patternslib has invented. Patternslib just uses it and like builds it into, makes it usable out of the box. And here also, because the theme here is, or the topic is make it nice, we also have some more options. For example, we can add transitions or a transition duration, stuff like that. So that allows us to play around with that a bit more. Okay, so that was the one example of making like this overview and like adding a auto submits with injection. Another use case, the client said, okay, actually I'm mostly interested in these audit reports and I want to quickly see all of them like sorted by date or whatever. Just in a table, just put them there so we can compare them, and then we'll see, and we'll just have like so that we can compare and filter down. So the very first naive approach is I deliberately make this a bit ugly, just for demonstration. We just have a search page that just lists all the audit reports with most of the relevant fields in a table, just under each other. Like I have, this is actually using the default Plone search page. So I can, I don't know, type something like this. Oh, there's even a bug, it doesn't update. But anyway, quick search and narrow down. But of course, that's by far not enough. We need a really good filter because, I mean, we have all these fields at our hands, so we need something like the advanced search. And this is actually where we do use the advanced search box or the templates and just customize them that the Plone offers us. So we have all these vocabulary-based fields, so that's exactly where it makes sense to use a dropdown, for example. So I can say I'm interested in supplier audit reports from this and that plant, but it should only be like an internal audit. And all those that are at least conditional pass or pass, and well, not before the year 2013 maybe. So this is not rocket science, but it's just was for us really easy and quick to build a little filter that is really nice and slick like that. I know that mockup already comes with something that's similar like this. So this is a select to widget. I just think that the patternslib one is a bit nicer to use. So this is called the pat autosuggest. So you have an input widget. You put the class autosuggest on it, and then you have several options to define where the suggestions that you see there come from. You can just add a list of words, or you can say, or in this case, I opted for the JSON option, just to show you that even though designers hate JSON usually, and some patterns do like make a concession, and like because in that case it just it's so handy to pass in data as JSON. Like this is the example for the plant. I pass in just a very simple JSON data type ID to a title in there, and since the vocabulary is fixed, I add the additional parameter allow new words equals false. That means I'm only able to select stuff that's already there as a vocabulary. And a different example would be a user picker or an email picker field that would, if I start typing something, would show me the existing users with or the emails that match my input. And if it doesn't find anything, then I can just add something new. So that's where allow new words would be true. So actually, I only use it as a drop-down, but I can start typing something like this. That's basically, I mean, with only 4 elements in there, it's easier to just use it as a drop-down. And the second one here, very similar, but with an additional parameter. I don't want, like in this case, it doesn't make sense to have an AND search or with more than 1 element. So if I want to select something else, I first have to delete the first and pick something else. And that's just another option. Maximum selection size equals 1. Don't allow more than 1. And again, looking at the documentation, we have several options here. Like as I said earlier, to pass in the words that like are the part of the basis of the suggestion, I can just pass in a list, or I can pass it in as JSON and a URL to as a JSON data structure, and that can even be, like in my example, a URL to some element in my view or whatever. Sorry, not URL. It can be a variable that comes from my view. And OK, if you paid attention and you saw me using this data picker, that should look quite familiar because, not data picker, date picker, that should look quite familiar because this is the one from mockup. So here I smuggled in a mockup pattern, which is pat pick a day. So the gist is, I mean, mockup and patternslib are not mutually exclusive, not at all. Actually, they work nicely together. But it depends. In my experiments, I found a few cases where, I don't know, putting a pat pick a day inside a pat clone gives problems. But this is something that the JavaScript guys, the developers, obviously we need to work on that and fix that. But actually, that's the whole idea, that patternslib and mockup are complementary. And of course, yeah, this one, mockup, also comes with documentation on their own side, on its own side, how to use the pick a day pattern. OK, but as with every client project, there comes this one requirement where you think, OK, now they're getting a bit crazy, but OK, what do we do about it? I mean, everybody knows that. So in this case, our audit results, they can be of different types. They can be a financial audit or operational, whatever. And the outcome is basically always a pass, conditional pass or fail. But it must be called differently depending on the audit type. Well, so in one case, it's ABC. In the other case, it's just the other way around. It's CBA. Or in the other, it's green, red, yellow. Now, as in a display sense, I mean, just displaying the results and substituting an ID for the actual value, that's trivial. I mean, that's what programmers do. But the question is, they want to do that already in the input form, in the edit form. So if I input something and select the audit type, I should get the options for the result depending on what I just input earlier. So again, looking at a random audit report. So we're interested in this audit result dropdown. So currently, the options are ABC, set to C. If I switch the audit type up here to financial, it will be CBA, like it will still be the same value, but it just gets exchanged. Or operational will be red, fail. So if I switch it I don't know, to yellow and save, it will like here deliberately show the internally stored value, so it's still conditional pass, but it just gets exchanged on the fly. And this is also where a pattern comes in handy. Now, disclaimer, I'm not saying that this is the way to do it. It was just for us a quick and easy way to handle this kind of requirement, to use the pat depends pattern that lets you show or hide elements in a page depending on previous user input. So like in the example before, this shows the code for if the order type is set to operational, then my values are green, yellow, red. So what we did here, we actually have for all those variations of the results, we have our own select element, which has the class pat depends to indicate that we should use that pattern. By default, all those select elements are disabled. And the important thing is the condition for pat depends. The data pat depends tells us if like the field for the order type, form widgets minus order type, is just dexterity making the form. That's just the name that comes out of it. So you need to know the name of the other field. So the field name for order type, if that is operational, that's the internal value, then this pat depends will make it active. The action both here means pat depends can either show something, like remove the hidden, or enable something, remove the disabled. And action both means enable and show it at the same time. And then we just list the options, green, yellow, red, and the values pass, conditional, and fail. And of course, for the other cases, we just add that same code again. So yeah, again, looking at the documentation, so the demo on the PatternSlib website has a bit more, like some extra examples. But what happens? But just by this is just a simple way, or like front-end centered way of manipulating your forms on the fly. Yes, and this is what I mentioned. So the action both action can be show, enable, or both, for example. There's also a few transition effects that you can use. Okie doke. Yeah, so that for our story, that was like our excursion into the world of Acme. By the way, this request of make like this labeling of the audit results was literally a request from the client. This is not just an example that I invented here, but that's how it is. So let's look at some more advanced usage. Also, two projects based on Plone using PatternSlib a lot. So one is Quave or Plone intranet, and actually, I'm cheating a bit. The actual Plone-based Plone-based Quave looks exactly the same, but this is just the prototype running on Jekyll because I didn't want to have start up the full server. But anyway, patterns are used all over the place. Like here, a pat tooltip to display little extra menus. This little guy on the sidebar. Then using injection just to load certain parts. And you see, if I click it for the first time, you will notice a spinner appearing very briefly. Pat depends if I click here, or if I pat depends if I toggle something, then some buttons are enabled or not, or whatever. Also, okay, select users want to change their role. How does that work in a little modal? So that's also another pattern, path modal. Just pop up something, and afterwards, I don't know, reload the page or inject parts of it. And of course, we use injection a lot. So several different content areas. You can browse in one area, and then wherever you click, reload, depending, like reload just whatever you're just currently interested in. If you're interested in that, Guido Stevens will give an introduction to Quave, I think, right after this talk or sometime today. So that would be where to learn more about that. And another application using patterns and running on Plone is EURA. And online, it stands for, that's a stupid acronym, stands for Online Interactive Risk Assessment, for a European agency that does occupational safety and health at work. And also, I mean, it's just using patterns here to make a nicer user experience, and just in a very simple way. For example, adding these little explanations. So what the user needs to fill in some stuff, just an explanation. Okay, if I click, what do I need to do here? Just provide some information. Or here it's about entering approaches to mitigate risk, and the user can like type that on their own, or maybe from the back end there might be some pre-existing remedies, so that might be you might be able to pre-fill them like this. This is a path collapsible that I used before in my talk. This is a path clone. So it's just using patterns in this way just makes it easy for the designer on the one hand to envision what something will look like, but also for the developer. It's just really simple to just to get in that mindset, add some classes, and then then you can argue with the designer who has to do the CSS for it. If it's a really good designer, then everything comes with bells and whistles. But still, it's just, I think, for both sides, the designer side and the developer side, it's just really useful and easy to get something good looking quickly like that. And of course, under the hood, the whole JavaScript, you need people to build that in the first place. But that's not today's topic. I mean, how to add and customize patterns is another matter. But my point is, get out there and start using it if you're interested, or just try it out, because we already have lots there. Of course, as I hinted at already, we're not, I mean, this is the integration of patternslib patterns into Plone is not perfect yet. I mean, we do have mockup, which is already gives us a lot. But with these plone.patternslib, it's just an approach of making those more patterns like that available in Plone. My long-term goal, or I'm hoping that we can continue down the path of unifying mockup and patternslib in such a way that the extra patterns that are defined in mockup that are generally useful, that they land in the basic core package patternslib. Mockup also has some very Plone-specific patterns, like for the registry or stuff like that. That doesn't make sense as a generic pattern, but that should be kept in mockup as a specialized flavor. And I don't know, at someday, just when mockup and patternslib are unified or streamlined, have the patternslib fully integrated into Plone, unless, of course, Plone is going into a completely other direction with Angular 2 or whatever. But that would be, I mean, the beauty is patternslib is there and ready to use right now. So it's not something that is dependent on rewriting the whole JavaScript story. And of course, update documentation, etc., etc. And at some point, according to the time-honored business plan, at some point, everybody profits. And yeah, who knows where that's from? South Park. Right. So what do I mean with unified duplicated patterns? One example is pat tooltip. We have pat tooltip in mockup, and we have pat tooltip in patternslib. This is the mockup one. This like works half the time. Okay, here I hover over it, setting the data toggle. So I hover over something and I see a tooltip. It can be formatted much nicer. I didn't bother to copy over the nice CSS, but anyway, looking at the mockup page, it's just, I think, to my knowledge, the mockup pattern just offers you hover, and then it works like this. But compared to what patternslib offers, the tooltip pattern just has a plethora of use cases. You can activate it by click. You can fetch external content. You can, or just show the same content. You can even tell the tooltip where it should attach itself to, like left, right, bottom, whatever. Can be sticky, so I can scroll the page and it stays there until I click outside of it. I can have a tooltip that even if I click outside, won't close until I have a close trigger. I can have rich content like this, not just text, but like formatted content, etc. So, and there's, I think, a few more patterns which are similar but have different names. Like, I mean, what I was trying to rave about earlier, the path inject, which I find really useful. There's something similar in mockup called path content loader, which does similar things, but in my opinion is just not as advanced, or it's a bit more difficult to specify the actual action. I mean, with injection, an injection works on an a tag or a form tag, where you already have an href or an action. So that's the address of the page that you're going to inject. And with the content loader, you have to specify that extra, I think, in an attribute, whatever. I mean, that's small things, but I mean, there's a bit of duplication and similar things going on. That's also why, I actually need to open the resource page again. That's actually why plone.patternslib will not offer you the full set of patterns that patternslib offers yet, as it says here on the README. For example, as I mentioned, the pat tooltip or toggle, because they either conflict or some other things. Yeah, almost there. Some other things just are conflicting, but this is like, we know our work is cut out for us. We want to make them available and unify them. I just cannot really say if it's going to happen tomorrow or in 3 days, but yeah. Gist is go, yeah, and finally, again, check out patternslib.com. Shows you all the patterns that there are, all with examples. And going back to my story, I think, luckily, I reached the end. So yeah, questions, please.
Yeah, on your autocomplete or autosuggest, I have another similar thing. It's called type ahead.
Uh-huh.
And what I need to do is display not just the genus and species of a plant, but also its common name. Is there a way to, so like you type in the first few letters and you get to see a list of those things in your list of options to select. Does any of these tools implement that feature?
I mean, that should be possible. So that would be the pat autosuggest. I'm not sure about your exact use case, but you can define if you type something here, like Apple. Yeah, and then you can have like make a difference between the internal ID and the value that's shown. So the internal ID would be the Latin genus and species name,
right.
And you could then in brackets show the complete title so that you can separate it like that. I'm not sure if that really fits your requirements, but that's
exactly
possible.
what I'm doing.
Yeah. It's if you look at the attributes, either for the prefill or the words, you can, I mean, the example of ID versus title, and ID could be just the Latin name, and then title, Latin name plus the trivial name or whatever in
Common
bracket.
name.
Common name, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you for your
Thank you.
attention.